YouTube has decided to not share my videos with everyone who subscribes. Please follow me on social media to stay up to date. Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is $3 Theater, and the reviews are in for Solo: A Star Wars Story. The embargo just lifted. The movie opens up in a week, and it ain't looking the best. It's not looking horrible, but it ain't really looking the best for the Ron Howard led spin-off film for Solo. This one's currently sitting at 75%. That number will probably go up as more and more people see it, but right now, it ain't looking as good as one would hope. So, as always on the RT recap, what I like to do here is go through the fresh and rotten reviews to look to see about if we can find a good middle ground if you're an average moviegoer trying to determine and decipher exactly what you're going to get out of this film. So let's jump over here quickly to the story. If you don't quite know what this background story of this movie is, board the Millennium Falcon and journey to a galaxy far, far away in Solo: A Star Wars Story, an all-new epic adventure with the most beloved scoundrel in the galaxy. Through a series of daring escapades deep within a dark and dangerous criminal underworld, Han Solo meets his mighty future co-pilot Chewbacca and encounters the notorious gambler Lando Calrissian in a journey that will set the course for one of Star Wars saga's most unlikely heroes. Now, again, these will probably not contain spoilers, but just be on the radar for that. I haven't read these. I go through these kind of cold, so let's look and see here what we're working with. All right, so right off the bat, Sam Adams, top critic for Slate. Rotten. Corporate directive made flesh a quarterly earnings report in a vest and black leather boots. That is not good. That's a cold, callous take on it, right? But for a second, let's kind of take a look at this. We know that back in 2012, Disney bought Lucasfilm, ILM, Skywalker Sound for $4.08 billion, basically ensuring that we were going to get Star Wars movies until the end of time or until they ceased to become profitable. Out of the few movies released thus far, all of them have grossed over $1 billion, but we can tell that, well, this was one of the ones that no one really asked for, and apparently Sam Adams here was not a fan. Now, Rafer Guzman from Newsday, who also wasn't a huge fan of Deadpool, I believe, says, "Starry Star Wars fans, the first dud of the new series has arrived in Solo: A Star Wars Story." And that's been kind of the idea behind it. I had a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday who follows this stuff tangentially. And he was like, I've heard it's a raging dumpster fire. That comment from Raffer or Rafer, however you want to pronounce it, is going to probably stick in some people's minds. Now, Lindsay Barr from the Associated Press here says, Solo is a straightforward piece of pulpy entertainment with some agreeable performances from Ehrenreich and Donald Glover, who seems to be having the most fun of all the actors. Well, that's good. You would want someone like Donald Glover to live up to the idea, to the mantle of Lando Calrissian, while still having fun playing the part. But part of it, too, could be that the Ron Howard director change-up really did kind of sully morale, and the fact that he went through these very quick setups and he shot very fast may not have given the best performances all around. Never mind the stark contrast to how Phil Lord and Chris Miller did it by shooting it from multiple angles and having multiple takes and everything else. Now, Glenn Weldon here from NPR says, because it sets its sights lower, its aim is truer. It may not look like much, but it got it where it counts. And okay, so what that tells me is that the movie is not as grand as an episode, right? It's not as grand as Rogue One because we know what Rogue One was trying to do and we know what was at stake, so to speak. This is kind of the first original film, right, in the series. This is the first kind of original not tied in to the greater episodic narrative. I mean, well, it is, but it also isn't at the same time. I haven't seen it, so maybe they do tie it into A New Hope, so on and so forth, but we don't quite know yet. But it does kind of aim its sights lower, and maybe they're just trying to hit the target in order to get past the controversy to knock the next one out of the park, because we know that there's going to be 3 of them. Now, A.O. Scott here from the New York Times says, it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it also holds whatever irreverent, anarchic impulses it might possess in careful check. Okay, so that tells me that they know that Solo is not entirely like a comedic character. It doesn't take itself, like, it doesn't hold itself to something as serious as, let's say, The Last Jedi. It's more pulpy, more fun, more action adventure like, or let's say as serious or grimdark as Rogue One. And it basically keeps those particular impulses in check, meaning, at least is my interpretation, that in moments where it could go that dark, it could go like it did previously, it's not doing that here. And now Chris Nashawati from Entertainment Weekly here says, it's the very definition of solid and competent. Nothing more, nothing less. So what that says to me is that this kind of also plays off like a by the numbers studio blockbuster set to come out in the summer season. Nothing that is going to raise the bar exponentially, but nothing that's also going to sit there and be viewed as being kind of lazily written trash, right? Or lazily written sequel garbage in order to fill the coffers of the shareholders, right? Because that's also something that happens as well. Now, Nick Shager here from the Daily Beast says, Rotten Review, operating in a middle ground register that's defined by bland safeness. He certainly shoulders the weight of the chaotic material in a role that demands greatness. He is, in a word, okay. So obviously he's referring to Alden Ehrenreich playing Han Solo, and basically trying to say that he's just playing it safe the whole time. They don't really take any risks, but I think we all kind of expected that to happen as well. I think we all kind of looked at the idea of this and we're like, yeah, I get it. They're not going to really take a lot of risks with it. They don't want to risk messing with the character, messing with the legacy, especially after the shakeup last summer, which was almost a year ago now. Holy crap! Of Phil Lord and Chris Miller leaving the project, and so maybe it's just a little bit too safe, and that's why Nick here didn't care for it. Now, Don K from Den of Geek here says, Solo was not a bad film, just a relentlessly average one with no reason to exist. Still giving a positive review, although that does kind of come across as a very kind of just middle road, more probably negative than not review. But while I agree with the concept there, essentially, of like it doesn't necessarily have a reason to exist, it still is something. And it's taking us away from the Skywalkers right now. And it's giving us something a little bit different. Whether or not we needed it is up for debate. I think certain people are going to think differently, but I think it definitely has a reason to exist. Now, Steve McFarlane here from Slant says the imprint of Star Wars on everyday American life now feels so despotic that it's too much to ask a film like Solo to be moving or thrilling as a piece of cinema. But it's not necessarily what you would call cinema. It's a pulpy adventure. It's a movie. It's not a film. It's a movie, right? It's not meant to be deep. It's not meant to be something that's going to take you home at night and go, man, I really wonder about the plight of the Wookiees. You know, you're not gonna think about that. It's not designed for that. And so coming at it from that particular perspective, I think is doing it a disservice, because I think it's trying to associate or trying to prescribe their own belief system on this movie, and it didn't live up to what they believed it should have been. Like a poignant take on society. Like, what did you want? Did you want like Solo to be the leader of the resistance to fight back against the evil empire, aka Donald Trump? I mean, is that what you were going for here, Slant Magazine? I think so. Now, Julia Alexander from Polygon here says, the relationship between Lando and Han feels designed for Star Wars generation that wants to see more between its characters, especially those embedded in Star Wars lore who might appear in the next decade of sequels. That's good, because we know, we can ascertain, we can speculate, I should say, that the way Star Wars is going is going to probably end up being more like Marvel. They're going to take it from that particular approach where it's a long arc. Now, this movie is not going to tie into any of that stuff just yet, but it might. It might. If the movie does well, it does as well as they're hoping, and the sequels do as well as they're hoping, then it could tie into something larger. They could keep these guys around to keep telling side stories about Han working with the Hutts, running from the Hutts, the smuggling stuff gone wrong, leading into Mos Eisley, leading into that moment. And maybe even one of the movies ending with them going to Mos Eisley, tying in directly to A New Hope, very similar to how Rogue One did. I do actually feel at some point in some draft of some pitch somewhere, that is precisely where a movie ends. That's what I'm thinking. But we know that they want this to be around for a while, and they're trying to establish these characters. It may just be a little rough around the edges getting out of the gate. Now, Sean P. Means here from the Salt Lake Tribune says Solo Star Wars story works both on its own merits as an exciting action spectacle and as an origin story for the franchise's favorite scoundrel. So giving it a 3.5 out of 5, basically saying it works. It knew what it wanted to be. It knew what it needed to be. It accomplished its goals. And to me, if I'm being honest here, that is pretty much what I want out of this. I want it I absolutely want it to just know what it is, to be self-aware, to not take it too seriously, and to go. That's all I care about. And I think if it accomplishes that, it will be a success. Now, Scott Mendelson here from Forbes, who's been talking about this a lot on his own website, says, for better or worse, this is the first Star Wars movie that doesn't feel or play like an event. Now, that's actually a good thing, in my opinion. And I'll tell you guys why. As much as I love the episodes, they come across like an event. And not always in the best possible way, right? I mean, like going into episode 7 was clearly an event. Going into episode 8 was clearly an event. Rogue One was clearly an event. It was tying in, but it was a big, bold spectacle. This is not being marketed as such. This isn't a way to tie into the greater, grander narrative that we've been growing up with and living with for 4 decades now. This is telling kind of the first time, taking it in a direction that is slightly different. And in it not playing up that particular aspect. No Death Star. Right? People complain about that for a long ass time, right? Considering the fact that the Death Star or something like it has been in practically every movie except The Phantom Menace and The Last Jedi. So, in 6 out of the 8 movies, it's made an appearance. So this time, there's none of that happening there. It is not going into that. It's not a Skywalker journey. It's not tied to that storyline. Yes, it's a solo film, pun intended, but it's also meant to be its own thing. It's also meant to be separate, but still tie in. And I actually look at that as being more good and more grand than not. And so I do hope that this movie lives up to expectations. I won't be seeing it until next week. I am excited to see it. If it's a dumpster fire, I'll tell you. If it's a good movie, I'll tell you my thoughts on it. I try to approach every movie from an entertainment perspective. I've been critical of Star Wars. I've been critical of Kathleen Kennedy, and that isn't changing at all, by the way. People like to claim that I flip-flop. I'm not. I'm still going to be very critical of where things go with this. But at the same time, just being the fan that I am and loving the franchise as much as I do, I'm willing to give this the benefit of the doubt and go in with hoping for the best possible expectation. And if it doesn't live up to it, I'll be the first person to call it out. Very similar to how I did with The Last Jedi. I just hope that this isn't the case. So anyway, this is RT Recap. So right now we're looking at 75% just from the initial batch of reviews that have come in. We've gotten kind of a good look at where the movie is, what they've attempted to do, maybe what's hit, what's not. The acting of Alden Ehrenreich didn't come up in any of these snippets about whether or not, he was good as Han Solo. So that is clearly something that is going to be taken into account by people who've heard the stories that he needed an acting coach, that have heard the stories that he wasn't able to knock it out of the park on the first try. So I think where things are right now, going in, it maybe won't be as good as some people want it to be, but it's also not going to be the raging dumpster fire that many others actually want it to be. But leave your thoughts and opinions below. I do want to hear what you guys have to say. If you haven't already, please thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel, check back often for more content from me. Remember, I do live streams at 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time where I go through the day's movie news. And then, of course, those are clipped out and put up on here if you happen to miss them. If you want to support the channel, the best way is through Patreon right now. And we'll talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great day and peace out.